the record? Yep.
Yep, done.
Oh, it's already done. Well done. Thanks. So I appreciate that a number of you will have been, over the course, you'll be fairly familiar with the elections process, but I'm going to run through this kind of longhand today just to make sure that people have access to the same information. So just by way of introduction, I'm Clydesdale Constituency. I'm the constituency returning officer, and obviously want to welcome you to the post-nomination awareness session. So thanks very much for giving us a bit of time tonight. I hope you'll find this session useful. And for those of you who don't know, if I can introduce Aileen Knudsen, our Deputy Returning Officer for the constituency, and I'll use it again, probably the most experienced election official in Scotland. So this will be Aileen's last election, but there's a wealth of knowledge available to you. So you should have by now received a copy of the post-nomination pack, so hopefully crammed full of information, and I'm going to run through the content of the pack tonight. So the session tonight we'll run through, just see a couple of colleagues joining us. I'll run through the contents of the pack following the close of nominations yesterday. That was Wednesday, the 31st of March. I'll provide a little bit more detailed information on the poll, the postal vote process and arrangements, and the count, and that will include some of the information around the COVID safe measures that are in place. And we'll obviously provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. Please feel free to ask questions. There is no dumb questions in relation to the detail around this. Use the hand icon if you have that facility on Teams, and between Aileen and I will try to capture this. And as we go through the agenda, but there's obviously an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session as well. A note of tonight's session will be prepared, and we'll provide that to you after the meeting, so don't feel as if you have to write down all the detail that will be shared tonight. We will put out a note, and obviously this recording will be available to those who want to see it again on a replay. I think it'll be on Dave, I think, is the appropriate location. So if people are happy, I'll just start running through the sections. So in terms of that post-nomination pack, there's obviously 4 constituencies in South Lanarkshire Council area, and your post-nomination pack contains a range of documents relating to the 4 constituencies that are under my jurisdiction and administered by me for this election. The post-nomination documents and arrangements for the regions will be dealt with by the respective regional returning officers, and for those who didn't join the previous session, I'll just run through those. So first of all, there's the Clydesdale constituency that sits within the South of Scotland region. The regional returning officer is Gavin Stevenson, who's the Chief Executive at Dumfries and Galloway. I believe that Gavin has had a fairly serious and sudden illness that may mean he's not available for this election, but that's not been confirmed as yet. And once I get that detail, I'll share that with candidates and agents, just so you're up to date. The second of the regional areas is the East Kilbride constituency. That sits within the Central Scotland region, and the regional returning officer is Des Murray, who's the Chief Executive of North Lanarkshire Council. The Rutherglen constituency sits within the Glasgow region, and the regional returning officer is Anne-Marie O'Donnell, who's the Chief Executive of Glasgow City Council. And then finally, Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse constituency also sits within the Central Scotland region, and the regional returning officer, is a reminder, is Des Murray at North Lanarkshire Council. So there are 3 statutory notices. They should have been emailed out at the close of nominations yesterday. So firstly, the notice of poll and statement of persons nominated, and you'll find that as Appendix 1 within your pack. And you'll see that there are 4 candidates in each of the constituencies. That's Clydesdale, East Kilbride, Rutherglen, and then Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. So 4 candidates listed nominated for each of those constituencies. The order of candidates you'll find on the notice is the same as they'll appear on the ballot paper, and they are listed alphabetical by surname, as is the protocol. Appendix 2 in your pack has a notice of election agents, document self-explanatory, but has the details relating to each of the election agents for the candidates that are standing in the election. And then Appendix 3 is a notice of a situation of polling places. And as we mentioned in the previous session, there's just a few changes from the previous elections, a couple of venues that are not available to us and that have replacements. So I would remind you just to familiarise yourself with Appendix 3's contents. So that's been updated now with electorate information, and that's as at Wednesday, the 24th of March 2021, which is the relevant date for your election expenses. So there's an important connection there for each of the polling places on that appendix. And those notices are displayed in various public-facing council offices and on the council's website, and you'll find that at www.southlanarkshire.gov.uk. So moving on to Appendices 4A and 4B, that's the notification of appointment of polling, counting agents and postal vote agents. This format will allow candidates to appoint as many polling agents as considered necessary to attend the polling places. However, the number of counting agents is based on the maximum capacity to allow us to ensure the safe conduct of the election at each of the venues. And that, as I said, is related to the capacity of those venues. I mentioned in the pre-nomination briefing session my intention to try to minimise the people who attend the count venue, who don't have a particular role within the venue. So in local parlance, I have indicated that there will be very limited, if none, of the returning officers' guest passes being issued out for this election, and there'll be no general hangers-on, I think, as I said, the kind of local parlance. And the reason I'm doing that is to maximise the numbers that I can give you to ensure that you've got the appropriate count agents within the venue. So by stripping out those who would normally attend an electoral event, I'm able to give a confirmation that the same number of count agents that was allowed in 2016, I'm able to offer to candidates for this election. So just to run through that, that would mean that there is 10 counting agents for each candidate, in addition to the candidate, the election agent, and a candidate's guest. So for each candidate party, there'll be 13 passes in total to attend the count. And as I said, we'll manage to keep that consistent with previous elections, which I'm pleased to do. Constituency returning officers' guests, as I said, will be very limited. The one other area I would just identify is regional candidates, and we again will reach out to regional candidates just to ascertain their intentions in whether they would be coming to our count venues. And this is all about the modelling of the numbers in each space to keep the election as safe as possible. So the statutory deadline for returning of the forms noted at 4A and 4B is Wednesday, the 28th of April 2021. However, as ever, it would be helpful if you could return that document as early as possible, or much earlier than that deadline. And that allows us to put into the process the preparation of the passes that need to be produced, and we will issue these out. Excuse me, till I get rid of that additional call. Excuse me. One of the issues of having Microsoft Teams that people can dial in as you're speaking. So that will allow us to produce the passes at the close of that date. And on receipt of your completed document, you'll be advised of the arrangements for picking up your passes in advance of attending the count. Moving on to 4B, that's the postal voting agents. If you're appointing postal voting agents to attend the postal votes opening session, the deadline for the return of that form is different, and we require that postal votes agent form in advance of the relevant session that your agent wishes to attend. The opening sessions are detailed in Appendix 5, and I'll talk through that in a second. The third document in Appendix 4 is Appendix 4C. There's also a pro forma at Appendix 4 for completion and return with the above form. This provides you with 5 car parking spaces for the count venue car park And on the advice of Police Scotland, car registration numbers will be printed on the car parking passes, and these will be prepared and issued at the same time as your passes requested on the notification of appointment of agents forms. So effectively, it just allows us to know who's coming to the venue, make sure the spaces are allocated for you, and make this as simple and streamlined as possible. The remaining items in your post-nomination pack will be referred to as we pass through the agenda. Okay, if people are good, I'll just continue on. So that takes us on to the postal and proxy vote arrangements. So the issue of postal votes, as the date for the first issue of postal votes draws closer, I would, as I mentioned earlier at the pre-nomination session, remind you of two key principles when dealing with postal votes, and indeed all election arrangements. You'll find details in the Electoral Commission's Code of Conduct for Candidates and Agents, and again, detail of that is contained in your nomination pack. But the two principles are that candidates and agents should uphold the secrecy of the ballot. The second key principle is that candidates and agents should not place themselves in a situation where their honesty or integrity can be questioned. So two key principles you'll find underpinning all of your activities as part of this election. The deadline for postal vote applications or changes to existing arrangements is at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of April 2021. You can download application forms from the Electoral Registration Office website or from www.gov.uk/register-to-vote, register to vote. So just a quick reminder of the dates, and again, you'll find the detail of that in the pack, but in terms of the postal votes, the first run, and these all go out first class, for those where we have received the applications by the 31st of March, the dispatch dates for postal votes, first class, on Wednesday, the 14th of April 2021. The second run, where application deadline for registration and postal votes comes in at the Tuesday, the 6th of April, those that are received by that date go out on Friday, the 16th of April 2021. However, if any application didn't make the second mailing deadline on that date, on Tuesday, the 6th of April, there will be a final run, a third run, on Monday, the 26th of April 2021. So given it's first class and the arrangements that we have with the Royal Mail, postal votes should reach the voter the following day. Postal voting packs include a ballot paper and a postal voting statement. The voters must provide their date of birth and a signature, unless there's a waiver in place, on the postal voting statement for their vote to be counted. If someone's unable to sign, they should apply for a waiver prior to the deadline of 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 20th of April. If a postal voter loses or spoils their postal voting pack, a replacement can be issued by contacting the election office up to until 10 p.m. on polling day. So moving on to proxy votes, if someone is too late to apply for a postal vote, or they will be away when the postal vote is due to be delivered, they may wish to consider appointing a proxy to vote on their behalf. The deadline for applying to appoint a proxy is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 27th 2021 of April 2021. And in relation to a notice of opening for postal votes, and you'll find that in Appendix 5A within your pack, the statutory notice of opening of postal votes, the notice advises on the venue and dates for the opening of postal vote sessions. As I mentioned earlier, candidates must ensure they have completed and returned their appointment of postal vote agents form prior to the opening session that their agent wishes to attend. This is particularly important this year, as entry will be by appointment, and a member of staff will be on duty to meet your postal voting agent at the agreed time at the west wing door of the council offices in Hamilton. For those not familiar with that building, that's not the main entrance, it's the entrance to the left-hand side as you face the building. The member of staff will escort your agent to and from the postal vote opening session venues, for example, the banqueting hall here in Almada Street, to observe the postal vote opening of envelopes and/or Committee Room 1 for the scanning or adjudication processes. So in an effort to raise awareness of what actually happens at the opening of postal votes, I've prepared a bit of an outline procedure which I'll run through. That's also detailed in Appendix 5, but it's worthwhile taking a moment to go through the procedure just to ensure you are familiar with the process. So the opening procedure, which is stage 1A in your pack, and that takes place between Monday the 19th of April through to Thursday the 22nd of April 2021. And that procedure for the first 4 days is simply to prepare the envelopes received for the full opening sessions, which will commence on Friday the 23rd of April. So stage 1A only. At that point, staff will open the outer envelopes, remove the postal voting statement ready for verification, and batch envelope A. That's the envelope that contains the ballot paper. Please note that envelope A will not be opened on the first 4 days of opening. That part of the process will take place in the banqueting hall at the council offices in Hamilton. In terms of the opening procedure for full opening sessions, from Friday the 23rd of April 2021 until Thursday the 6th of May 2021, the full opening process will be carried out as follows. And I'll just run through that full process. So stage 1A, postal vote assistants and supervisors will continue to work on 1A as we move through the process. Stage 1B, the postal vote team leaders and scanner operators who will be based in Committee Room 1 of Almada Street will scan the postal vote statements, adjudicate on the postal vote statements, and instruct on the opening of envelope A. Stage 2A, which is for postal vote assistants and supervisors, on the instruction of the postal vote team leader, the supervisors and postal vote assistants will commence 2A, which involves opening envelopes A, removing the ballot paper, and keep all ballot papers face down so they cannot be seen. Stage 2B, the postal vote team leaders will then scan the back of the ballot papers and reconcile the paperwork processed for each particular day, and that includes constituency, returning officer, and adjudication. And then finally, stage 2C, the postal votes team leader's final task is to place accepted ballot papers in the allocated wallets and ballot boxes and seal the ballot boxes. So whilst it's possible to observe that entire process, you will not be able to see the ballot papers, neither when the ballot paper envelope is opened, nor when the ballot papers are scanned. And I would remind you that ballot paper sampling is not permitted during the opening sessions, and also a reminder that advance notification must be given on the forms provided if you intend appointing postal vote agents to observe that process. Well, hopefully that gives you a reasonable illustration of that particular process and what you can see and what you won't see on the day. Okay, I'll move on to the poll cards. I mentioned in your pre-nomination pack, the first run of poll cards has now been posted, and those registered after the Friday 5th of February up to Monday the 29th of March, their poll cards will be dispatched on Monday the 5th of April 2021. And a reminder that those who apply after that day up to the deadline of Monday the 19th of April will be dispatched on Friday the 23rd of April 2021. So the poll cards will be issued in those days. In relation to arrangements in force at the poll, so in Appendix 6, you'll find some detail in the document that's been prepared to outline some of the local arrangements at polling places. And again, I would just like to highlight a couple of points from this document. Firstly, in respect of display of advertisements or publicity materials. As mentioned at the pre-nomination session, guidelines were issued as part of the nomination pack, and these two documents advise that this council does not permit fly posting on street furniture or the display of A-frames outside polling places. If any of your supporters disregard this, you'll be contacted to immediately arrange for the removal, failing which they will be removed by council staff. The second area is in relation to campaigning and leafleting. That's not permitted within the curtilage of the polling place. That is within the building or inside the perimeter fence of the polling place. Candidates or agents may ask the presiding officer at station number 1 to show them the layout plan which details the curtilage of the building, so you know the area that we're referring to. For this event, it's almost impossible to accommodate candidates and agents being permitted inside the entrance area of the majority of polling places and at the same time maintain the 2-metre safe physical distancing arrangements. The priority is to ensure that entrances are not congested so that voters feel safe on arrival at the polling place and that they don't feel that 2-metre distance has been compromised. So we will have COVID marshals on duty, and a key element of their responsibilities will be to control access to the polling place, provide advice and assistance to voters, reinforce the public health measures expected of polling staff and voters, and monitor the flow of voters through the polling place, and acting where necessary to avoid bottlenecks and excessive numbers entering the building at the one time. The COVID marshals will also ensure access and egress points to the polling place are secure. And I would ask that you and your colleagues respect the measures in place to ensure safe systems of work are maintained throughout the day. My principal consideration is the health and safety of candidates, agents, voters and staff, and these principles will not be compromised. So should any issues arise, the COVID Marshal will in the first instance discuss this with the supervising presiding officer who, if necessary, will contact my team at the election office to resolve. As constituency returning officer, I'll have final decision on any issues that do arise. In terms of those COVID safe measures at the poll, in addition to the above, there'll be a number of other measures in place to ensure safe arrangements at the poll. These will include face coverings, which will require to be worn by those attending unless there's a medical exemption, and visors will be offered where that's the case. This was advised on the polling cards that are issued out to voters. There'll be sanitising stations for voters on arrival and available to them as they exit the building. There'll be explanatory signage in place to advise on the measures in place both externally to the polling place and also internally. There'll be 2-metre physical distance markers in place to help people space out and understand excuse me, the distances between themselves and others entering the building. There'll be screens, these are perspex screens that will be between staff and voters. And there'll be a one-way system inside each polling place wherever possible. Stationery will not be shared during the day, and that includes pencils, which will be available for single use by voters, although voters may bring their own pencil or pen along to the poll. There'll be a cleaning regime in place throughout the day, and rooms will be well ventilated throughout the day. Third area just to touch on within the detail is that rosettes with candidate or party details are permitted to be worn. If someone is in the polling station for a prolonged period of time for the purposes of detecting personation, they should remove their rosette, however. And then finally, in relation to photography, well, again, you'll be familiar with this, there should be no photographs taken inside the polling station. Okay, if people are okay, I'll move on. What would you expect on the polling day? So in relation to our arrangements, the election office will be open from 6 AM in the morning, and any issues that arise should be directed to the election office. The election office can be contacted on 01698 455 745. In relation to polling staff arrangements are as follows. The staff will arrive at 6:30 to set up in good time to open the poll at 7 AM. There will be one presiding officer and one polling clerk on duty at each polling station. A polling station inspector will visit the polling places at the start of poll to support poll staff and the election office team and assist throughout the day with any arrangements. And we have standby polling staff who have been recruited to work at short notice if required, if there's a last-minute cancellation. In relation to voter turnout notice, to assist candidates and agents, the presiding officer at station number 1 will display a notice detailing voter turnout, and will try to update that detail approximately every 2 hours. The notice will be displayed inside the polling station number 1. Clearly, candidates and agents can ask for turnout information at any time. However, our priority is to ensure the voters get to vote, and if the presiding officer is busy with voters, the voters will take the priority. However, as stated, we'll try and make sure the notice is updated every 2 hours, and we'll try to assist with any individual inquiries subject to the numbers within the station. In relation to shared polling places, that's where there's more than one constituency voting at the same time, at the same polling place. I mentioned at the pre-nomination session, there are 321 South Lanarkshire polling stations. So that's the rooms where you actually vote. And they're located within 138 polling places. That's the buildings the poll is taking place in. And I would discuss shared polling places in more detail in this session. So I'm keen to ensure there's an understanding of the voting arrangements in place within each of those polling places and give you an opportunity to raise any issues or concerns in relation to those arrangements. So there are 3 polling places which will serve more than one constituency, and the arrangements have been put in place as follows to deal with those arrangements. So firstly, Crosshouse Primary School. For the Clydesdale constituency, and that sits within the South Scotland region, voters from register SL172 will vote at station 1, and that will be ballot box 88. For the East Kilbride constituency, that sits within the Central Scotland region, voters from registers SL062 and SL080 will vote at stations 2, 3 and 4, and respectively they are ballot boxes 98, 99 and 100. The second shared polling place is at Whitlaburn Community Resource Centre. So firstly, for East Kilbride constituency, that's in the Central Scotland region, voters from registers SL089, excuse me, that is 5 voters, will vote at station 1, and that's ballot box 162. For the Rutherglen constituency, and that sits within the Glasgow region, voters from registers SL107 and SL176 will vote at stations 1, 2, 3 and 4. And again, that's ballot boxes 206, 207, 208 and 209. And then the final shared place is St Mary's Primary School. For the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse constituency sitting within the Central Scotland region, voters from register SL132 will vote at stations 1 and 2, that's ballot boxes 255 and 256. And then for the Uddingston and Bells Hill constituency, which sits in Central Scotland region, voters from registers SL133 will vote at station 3. And North Lanarkshire Council are responsible for the arrangements at station 3. So in addition to the above, I'm keen to mention, as I indicated earlier, some changes to polling places since the UK election in 2019. Arrangements are in place to ensure voters are aware of those changes, so it's marked on their poll card. There's signage at the previous polling places as well. But these are as follows: Law Primary School for voters who previously voted at Tom Craig Centre, Carnwath Primary School for voters who previously voted at the Porta Cabin at the Village Green in Newbiggin, St Kenneth's Primary School for voters who previously voted at Kirkton Home Hall, Thornton Hall Lawn Tennis Club in place of the Porta Cabin at the same location, which was there in 2019. St Charles's Primary School for voters who previously voted at Westburn Hall, nearly there. Hamilton Caledonian Bowling Club for voters who previously voted at St John's Church Hall. And then finally, Hill House and Ernock Community Centre for voters who previously voted at the Cruise Centre. I would encourage also some feedback on the polling place arrangements after the event. That will allow us to continue to improve our polling arrangements at future elections. So I really do welcome any feedback on your observations. And a full list of polling places is provided in your post-nomination pack. Okay, people happy? I'll move on. So the notice of count arrangements you'll find at Appendix 7A in your pack. The count will commence at 9 AM on Friday the 7th of May 2021 and continue on Saturday the 8th of May 2021. And as we discussed at the previous session and earlier, attendance will be significantly restricted and only those issued with a pass can gain access to the account. We had also previously covered the organisation of the count, and just to run back over that detail. So in relation to day one, that's Friday the 7th of May, we will run the counts for the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse constituency. Excuse me, I'm getting messages up on screen as well, apologies. Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse constituency and the Central region. And that will take place in the John Wright Sports Centre and one section of the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club. That will be in sections 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And within your pack, you will see layout plans for each of the counts. Also on day one, we will run the count for the Rutherglen constituency in the Glasgow Central region. That will take place predominantly in the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club, and that will be in sections 6, 7 and 8. Both of those constituencies counts will be run to a conclusion on the Friday. Then we return on the second day of the count, the Saturday, and on day two we will undertake the East Kilbride constituency and the Central region element, and that will take place in the John Wright Sports Centre, one section of the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club. And again, that will be sections 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And on day two, we will also do, apologies. Also on the second day, we will do the Clydesdale constituency, and that's the South of Scotland region, and that will be undertaken in the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club, and that's in sections 6, 7 and 8. And again, those two constituencies counts will be run to a conclusion on the second day. So in relation to the kind of detail I'd mentioned, just to run back over it again, we've managed to strip out a number of people who would normally come to an event to ensure that we can maintain the same numbers of candidates, election agent, candidates guest and counting agents that we were able to offer in 2016. So obviously one candidate, one election agent, one candidate's guest and 10 counting agents per candidate, so that would be a total of 13. And a notice in writing of the agent's appointment stating names and addresses of the persons must be lodged with me not later than Wednesday the 28th of April 2021, and I've provided forms for the purpose as part of the post-nomination pack. But please note you're required to sign these prior to the submission. That will allow us to issue passes. And again, this is about our logistics of ensuring that we have an appropriate number of people in each area of the count venues. So we will issue 3 passes for the candidate, the election agent, and the candidate's guest for the Hamilton, Larkhall, Stonehouse and East Kilbride constituencies. That will give access to both count venues because the count's taking place on both sides and both properties. 3 passes for named counting agents to access both count venues as advised by the candidate or the election agent, and 7 passes for the remaining count agents to access only the John Wright Sports Centre. So that will give you an indication of how you would allocate your count agents. For Rutherglen and Clydesdale, they will only be issued with 13 passes, which gives access to the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club only. The passes will be different coloured just for easy recognition. I think the colours we're going with is pink for the John Wright Sports Centre only, white for the John Wright Sports Centre and the bowling club, and blue for the East Kilbride Indoor Bowling Club. My intention is to run the declaration for the counts that predominantly take place in the John Wright Sports Centre, and once the declaration is concluded for that constituency and those associated with that constituency have then left the venue, we will then undertake the declaration for the constituency that's predominantly being done in the bowling club, and it's just about managing the movement of people within the 2 buildings. As I said, my overarching principle here is to ensure the safety of everybody involved. So in relation to the count layout plan, which is Appendix 7B, it's worth at this stage taking a look at the layout plan, and I'm going to see if I can prevail on Aileen to try to pop this up on screen, just so we can have a look at that arrangement.
Just share my screen, it'll just take a second.
Okay, thank you.
Turnout first.
Okay.
Can you see that okay?
Yeah, so it may be slightly small on screen, but a copy of this is within your post-nomination pack. So you will see the layout of the counting, the count staff, should I say, and as the perimeter of each of the sections, there will be perspex screens in place, and those attending the count will be a minimum 2 metres back from the count assistants, again just reflecting the physical distancing arrangements. But the blue dots that you will see, which circle each of the respective sections, gives an opportunity for count agents to be able to observe at any station the activities that are taking place. So the left-hand side reflects the main hall of the John Wright that people will be familiar with. But again, just so we can get the capacities in place, we also have access to the lesser hall, which has a further section within it. Okay, the red dots that you will see within these sit within each of the sections, and that reflects where supervisors will support staff, but again, at all times maintaining that 2 metre distancing. I'm going to stop there because this is completely new to anyone who has attended counts before. Is that okay for people? Is it fully understandable? Is there any questions that people want to raise in relation to that layout? Okay, I'm seeing silence, so that's good, that's positive. So if I can just look very briefly at the top right-hand side of the John Wright, and you will see effectively a staging area. That's where the declarations will take place. Candidates will, in single file, follow me up onto the stage, and if they can take a place which will be pre-marked out with the 2 metre distancing on it, then as returning officer, having briefed you before you go onto the stage on the declaration, I will then undertake the declaration. I will step off the stage, and the successful candidate will come forward if they wish to make a few remarks. And then again, single file again, if people can then exit the stage. And again, it's just all about keeping everybody safe from those processes. Okay. Aileen, is it possible to pop up the indoor bowling club? Okay. So the indoor bowling club is actually, in floor space terms, it's slightly bigger for us. So again, a larger number of count agents, and that allows us to include one section which will undertake some votes, the counting of some votes related to the constituency that's predominantly been counted in the John Wright, and that allows us to equalise to a large extent the timing of both constituencies. And again, just to flag up on this, there is a, for those who know the building, bottom left, there is a raised, I think it's actually a bar area, but it's going to act very helpfully for us to allow us to space out the observation for returning officer adjudication. For that constituency. So that's the layouts for the 2 venues. As I said, there is a plan in your post-nomination pack. You might want to consider it in a bit more detail, but if there's any queries, once you've had a chance to have a look at it in more detail, please get in touch with us, and we'd be pleased to answer anything. Now, I've got one hand, but unfortunately not a name. It's saying my office, so can I bring someone in?
Hi, it's Bill Mills here.
Bill.
Clydesdale, how are you? Just one question, or 2 questions really. Am I right in saying there is only one counting clerk at each table? And what's the capacity for observers or counting agents at each table? And presumably there's a ballot box per table. So
Okay, so if I could confirm that each of those stations that Aileen's just blown it up shows an individual count member of staff, a count assistant, who has effectively their own workspace. And if there is 10 counting agents per candidate, then the ability for a count agent to observe within, you can see the kind of blue dots, you have the opportunity to choose where you would want to observe any particular count assistant who's undertaking their duties. Bill, is that helpful? Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that I see the possibility of perhaps 4 counting agents wanting to monitor the same table. I suspect there's not the capacity to accommodate that.
Yeah, I would also suspect that given that it's not tables now, it's individual count assistants, it would be unlikely, I would think it would be unlikely that 4 count agents would want to observe the one member of staff, and I would ask for a bit of common sense around that there is the opportunity to observe the count as opposed to everyone observing one member of staff.
Right.
Is that helpful? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it clarifies it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Graham, can I also bring you in?
Yeah, thanks, Clell. Probably this is just a stupid question, but I'm going to assume that there's wheelchair access to the stage.
We will have
Yes.
a ramp system. We'll have a ramp system at the front.
Yeah,
Graham,
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely. You. Yeah. Okay. Bill, is that still your hand? Is that just a legacy hand that's still there? Okay. Bill, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've taken it down, or should have.
That's off now. Thank you. Thank you. So that's the kind of layouts. If Aileen can maybe just drop those down. As I said, the detail of that's in your pack, and we'd be pleased to answer any queries, because it does look different to what we've previously arranged. So moving on in terms of the pack to Appendix 8, you'll find the verification and count procedures as detailed within that section. And in relation to recounts, we covered this to some extent in the previous session, but for those who weren't able to join us, if you feel there's anything wrong or anything you're unhappy with or you've seen throughout the process of the count, then please don't wait to the end of the night to raise it with us. Please raise it with us immediately. And once we've had an opportunity to do that, it just avoids us getting to the end of the night and someone asking for a recount on the basis of something was observed earlier. So please speak to one of the information officers and they'll advise me on the night of any issues that are arising. The count procedure in place, we've tested, we've done a number of run-throughs. It's pretty robust, and it will ensure there's reconciliation and that accuracy is absolutely paramount. So there's no sprint to get this done by some notional deadline in the middle of the night. We will be taking the time to ensure this is safely done, accurately done on the Friday and the Saturday. So other count areas that are in use, just so you're aware, in addition to the halls that we've spoken about, there is a viewing gallery which we dedicate for our media colleagues, again nicely spaced out. So they will be set up at the viewing gallery area, but due to the physical distancing requirements, and for those who are not familiar with that gallery, it's extraordinarily narrow. Those who have done any interviews there in the past, individual interviews won't be able to be undertaken there, and we're liaising with colleagues who will, this is May, hopefully dry, they will take place outdoors and not in that narrow gallery. So we'll liaise with them so that we know that they're prepared for those arrangements. We're also going to set up some marquees at the building, and they'll be set up for hospitality with a designated area in place for candidates and agents where tea, coffee, biscuits can be served. Staff will go into separate marquees, and they'll be designated a separate area so they can get a lunch break, etc. Again, we will do that in sections so that I think it's 20% of the count staff will go at any time for their break, and they'll use those marquees spaced out, etc. But there will be one dedicated for candidates and agents and your own colleagues. In relation to notes from the electoral registration officer, you'll find at Appendix 9, there's a document there that will assist with information relating to his office. If candidates and agents require any further information, you can contact the electoral registration office direct, and the details are within your pack. In relation to conducting your campaign, in terms of that, we can't give any legal advice, obviously, or any other advice about how you or your team conduct your election campaign, or about how you behave during that campaign. So we run the election, but we don't police the election or regulate it. And you'll need to have regard to your own legal liabilities and your own conduct. If you've got any specific concerns about the behaviour of any candidate or how they are campaigning, you should contact either Police Scotland or the Electoral Commission as appropriate. Now, just as we were preparing for this session tonight, literally at 10 minutes to 5 tonight, we also got a little bit further advice through from the Electoral Management Board, which I'm just going to share with you. So that advice was indicating that guidance on election campaigning has been updated to reflect the fact that face-to-face doorstep canvassing cannot commence on the 5th of April as had been hoped. Doorstep canvassing being allowed during the campaign is subject to the virus being sufficiently suppressed based on 3 specific conditions. One of those conditions has not been met at this point in time, and that's in relation to the COVID-19 infection rate as an average across Scotland has not fallen to 50 cases per 100,000 or less. So the 7-day average, as at the 1st of April today, is nationally sitting at 63 cases per 100,000. Excuse me. And as set out in the guidance, the EMB will keep that situation under regular review. And if the infection rate falls to the required level during the campaign period, the guidance will be updated again to reflect that doorstep canvassing can commence. But the EMB is asking that they would, indicating they would be grateful if you or your agents could ensure you're aware of that revised guidance, your supporters as well, particularly in relation to the update on doorstep canvassing. And similarly, the EMB has written via the Electoral Commission to members of the Scottish Parliament's political parties panel, and there'll be, in certain areas, there'll be candidates who are not represented by those parties. So if I can maybe just flag that to you, that's pretty hot off the press. I haven't read the full document myself, obviously, but at this point in time, doorstep canvassing is not permitted. So a couple of further areas just to round up. In terms of public awareness campaigns, just to note, there's national and local public awareness campaigns which are ongoing. We've got press releases, radio ads, TV campaigns, some partnership work with corporate, public and voluntary organisations to raise the profile of the election. The South Lanarkshire Council website and social media is also being used. Statutory notices are published where possible, working with minority groups in the South Lanarkshire Council area to encourage participation, and the election and electoral registration offices are both hosting helplines that hopefully we can answer any queries on. And the South Lanarkshire View website that people will be familiar with is also hosting some material. I want to give some particular profile to a piece of work that was done by a number of the South Lanarkshire Council youth apprentices who prepared an animation. Someone's joining. Who prepared an animation to encourage participation amongst young voters and those who hadn't voted before. And they've just finished some voiceovers. I think the original voiceovers had some actors, didn't feel authentic. We've now had the young people who created the animation to voice it over, and it comes across a great deal better. And that'll be getting rolled out for other young people. So My last section is really around what's next. So I mentioned earlier, a polling day and count awareness session will hold pretty close to the event, excuse me, on the 29th of April at 5:30. And that session, we will cover an update on the postal vote arrangements. We'll discuss the polling day arrangements and a little bit more detail. We'll discuss the count arrangements in a little bit more detail, and we'll provide information in relation to post-election arrangements, and obviously give you an opportunity to raise any questions that you haven't contacted the election office with in advance. So thank you for sticking the course with the presentation and a lot of information. It's there in written detail, but sometimes it's helpful just to run through that. So I'd like to just open up for any questions that haven't been covered in the presentation today. And this is an opportunity. Aileen and I are both here, so if there's anything you want to raise, please do it now. Stunned. So hopefully that means that we have provided a measure of information, and we've done so in a way that is digestible. So thank you all for joining us today. As I said, if there's anything further.
Cleland,
Yep.
Fiona Drybu's got her hands up.
Actually, she's not coming up on my screen, so Fiona, I do apologise. Yep,
Sorry.
please, Fiona, can I bring you in?
Right, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
It was really just to ask Aileen if she knew where the people who normally vote in Ali McCoy's Centre, where they're going, just offhand, because I wasn't sure where they would now have to vote.
I mean, obviously still the Ali McCoy Centre, but there's just because it's a vaccination centre, they've moved. They'll be moving over basically to allow us to poll. So the actual room, I don't think it'll be the normal room on the left-hand side. I think it's more likely to be in the hall. So
I didn't see it in the list. My mistake. I looked at the list and I've obviously not seen that one in there.
I'll have another look as well, Councillor Dryburgh.
Okay, because I had a look, but I thought it was only Green Hills. I don't Ballarup. I didn't see Ali McCoy stuff, mate. I must have misread it, because obviously it's a big question for me in my ward.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, let us do that check, Fiona. It's a good heads up in case there is an error there. But what we'll do is we'll do the check at the end of this session, and we'll email out to everyone who's attended the session. And if there's an amendment to be made, then obviously the amendment will be notified to all candidates and agents. But yeah, let's do a wee check on that, Fiona. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so just in case my system's not working fully, is there anybody verbally, anybody else who would like to come in? No. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully you found that helpful. There's wealth of detail. I'm sure you'll want to go through any questions or queries. Come back to the election office. We would be pleased to answer those. And as I said right at the beginning, there ain't no daft questions, so please do contact us. Okay, good night, folks.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Happy Easter, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.